EVO.
Pie in the Sky Media. This series contains adult language and descriptions of graphic violence throughout. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome back to Criminal Mischief with Carolyn and Brandon. You're listening to episode 160, a Karen Reed update. Hey, Criminal Mischief Nation. So we first started covering the Karen Reed case back in June of 2024. This was during her first high-profile trial for the second-degree murder of her Boston police officer boyfriend, John O'Keefe. So if you haven't already, please go back and listen to episode 88 in our Criminal Mischief feed under the title, What Happened to John O'Keefe? And nearly 4 years later, we still don't have an answer to that question. What exactly happened to John O'Keefe in the early morning hours of January 29th, 2022? But what we do know is that ultimately Karen Reed was tried twice by the Commonwealth. The first trial for second-degree murder began in April of 2024 and resulted in a hung jury. She was tried again in 2025 and was acquitted of all charges associated with the death of John O'Keefe.
Mr. Foreman, on docket number 2282CR117001, murder in the second degree, what say you? Is the defendant at the bar guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty.
This was a very unique trial, well, both of them, because as this verdict is being read, you can hear screaming outside from an enormous crowd of Karen Reed supporters. And the cheering continued outside as they listened and heard from Karen Reed on the steps of the courthouse after she'd been acquitted.
I just want to say two things. Number one is I could not be standing here without these amazing supporters who have supported me and my team financially and, more importantly, emotionally for almost 4 years. And the second thing I want to say is no one has fought harder for justice for John O'Keefe than I have and my team. Thank you.
So this week on Criminal Mischief, we're going to cover the latest twist in this case. Just last week, Karen Reed filed a civil lawsuit, and wow, it's a bombshell because in her complaint, she accuses members of law enforcement and people who were inside that after-hours house party of a widespread conspiracy and cover-up to frame her for the death of her boyfriend, Boston police officer John O'Keefe. So the first defendant listed on the lawsuit is the disgraced former Massachusetts State Trooper Michael Proctor. I don't think anyone who has followed this case will ever forget his vile testimony.
A person by the name of Doc writes, "Is that chick a smoke?" Correct?
Correct.
Who's the chick?
Miss Reed.
And you write E-H, right?
Yes.
And then you write nutbag, as Chief would say, correct?
Correct.
Who's Chief?
A friend of mine.
And then you write what?
She's got a leaky balloon knot.
Trooper Proctor, explain to the jurors what a balloon knot is.
Your, essentially, I guess your rectum area.
Your anus?
Yes.
That's what you were referring to about Miss Reed?
Yes.
And you were making fun of her because you believed at that time that it leaked? That's how you were treating Miss Reed? Yes or no?
Yes.
You followed that up with the phrase, leaks poo, didn't you?
I did.
Again, another reference to Miss Reed's medical issues and medical conditions, correct?
Correct.
Specifically focused on her anus, correct?
In reference, yes.
In this text exchange at 10:56 p.m., your buddy Bird writes, "I'm sure the owners of the house will receive some shit," correct?
Correct.
How did you take that to mean? Did you take that to mean that he could get in trouble?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what my friend was getting at.
Well, you had some idea.
Yeah, maybe.
That the owners of the house isn't going to get any shit for this, right?
That's how I interpreted it.
Yeah, you interpreted it like he's not going to get in any trouble. He's not going to be a suspect, correct?
Correct.
And he's not going to be implicated in any way. Is that right?
Correct.
And your answer was one word, correct?
Yes.
What was that word?
Nope.
Also listed are Sergeant Yuri Buchanan and Lieutenant Brian Tully. as well as the so-called house defendants, Brian and Nicole Albert, Jennifer and Matthew McCabe, and Brian Higgins. At this point, all of the defendants are being sued as individuals. But according to a footnote on the complaint, the town of Canton, which operates the Canton Police Department and the Massachusetts State Police, will also be added as defendants, which means deep pockets. Karen is seeking a jury trial and damages for several claims, including malicious prosecution, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and conspiracy, to name a few. So stick with me as I go over specific allegations, a cover-up among law enforcement and private citizens who have been described as a well-connected social group with strong ties to law enforcement. So after we go over the complaint and their alleged timeline, Criminal Mischief producer Brandon Morgan and I will then go over the details of this extremely polarizing case and this explosive civil complaint in our bonus content. And believe me, we have opinions. But first, a reminder, the burden of proof is vastly different in a civil trial than it is in a criminal one. So, say evidence that isn't allowed by a judge in a criminal trial because it might be deemed too prejudicial could be allowed in a civil trial. For example, in the O.J. Simpson trial, the extensive history of domestic abuse by O.J. Simpson against Nicole Brown Simpson was excluded from the criminal trial because it was deemed too prejudicial, but was the primary evidence in the civil trial, where O.J. Simpson was found liable for the deaths of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman. But let's get to the document. So I'm going to read specific passages related to the allegations from Karen Reed's lawsuit. Now, if you'll recall, prosecutors accused Karen of purposely backing her SUV into John O'Keefe and then leaving him to die in the snow. However, Karen's complaint asserts that John O'Keefe was killed inside the home of Brian and Nicole Albert during that late night after party, that his body was later moved outside to stage a hit-and-run accident scene. So in the complaint, under the header of Mr. O'Keefe's death, the suit reads as follows. On the evening of January 28, 2022, Mr. O'Keefe and Ms. Reed went out for the night. They first went to C.F. McCarthy's in Canton, where they had several drinks. They then went to the Waterfall Bar in Canton. There, they met up with a group of acquaintances, including Brian Albert, his wife Nicole Albert, Brian's brother Chris Albert, and his wife Julie, Jennifer McCabe, Nicole's sister and Brian's sister-in-law, her husband Matthew McCabe, and Brian Higgins. The group of acquaintances had several drinks and planned to continue the party back at the Alberts' home in Canton at 34 Fairview Road, the house. House defendant Jennifer McCabe told John O'Keefe that he should come to the house. The group had overlapping social relationships. At the time, Brian Albert was a Boston police officer, as was Mr. O'Keefe, though they didn't know each other well. Brian Albert and Brian Higgins were close friends. Higgins was an officer with the ATF. He also was permitted to keep an office at the Canton Police Department alongside Brian Albert's brother, Canton Police Detective Kevin Albert. Kevin Albert had a professional and social relationship with Michael Proctor. Brian and Nicole Albert's son, Brian Albert Jr., and his friends were already at the house for Brian Jr.'s birthday. In addition, Colin Albert, Brian Albert's nephew, was present. Miss Reed and Mr. O'Keefe had never been to the house before January 29, 2022. They arrived in front of the Alberts' home around 12:20 a.m. Miss Reed was reluctant to attend the party for several reasons, including that she was unsure whether they were at the correct location and whether they were even welcome to the late-night party. Mr. O'Keefe got out of Ms. Reed's SUV and indicated that he would check out the party and report back to her. Mr. O'Keefe walked toward the front door, garage area of the house, and entered one of the two doors. A period of time passed without any word from Mr. O'Keefe. Miss Reed, who was still hesitant to join, presumed that Mr. O'Keefe intended to stay, and therefore, she left to go home without him. Now I'm going to pause here because this is where Karen Reed describes in her complaint what she believed happened that night. Quote, "At some point after entering the house/garage, Mr. O'Keefe was involved in a physical altercation either inside the house or garage. During that altercation, the Albert's German Shepherd attacked him, and Mr. O'Keefe sustained multiple dog bites and scratches on his right arm. He also suffered an incapacitating contre-coup wound on the back of his head. Mr. O'Keefe's head wound was caused by falling backward and striking a ridged surface. The Albert's garage contains such surfaces. By contrast, the head wound could not have been caused by a vehicle strike or falling backward onto a flat, cold lawn, like the Alberts." Now, I want to pause from reading the document to say that the medical examiner's official conclusion was that the manner of death could not be determined, and that there were no injuries to Mr. O'Keefe's body consistent with a vehicle strike. The document doesn't mention a motive, but in this passage, some insight could be gleaned, at least from Karen's perspective, as to why these defendants allegedly, quote, concocted a plan to frame her for John's death. The complaint reads, "Because of their knowledge of criminal investigations, the Alberts, the McCabe's, and Higgins, House defendants, knew that calling for medical care to help save Mr. O'Keefe's life would trigger immediate and irreversible risk of their own criminal exposure. Therefore, at least the 5 of them agreed on a simple plan to exonerate themselves and implicate Miss Reed. They would tell anyone who inquired Mr. O'Keefe never entered the house and hide evidence that he was there, including his body. Sometime during the night, they repositioned a Ford Edge vehicle at a spot adjacent to the front lawn, which obscured the view of that area of the lawn from potential passerby. At some point further in the night, they carried or dragged Mr. O'Keefe's body to that same area in the yard, close to where one or more of them later claimed Miss Reed dropped off Mr. O'Keefe earlier that night. The plan was devised to make it appear that Mr. O'Keefe had been struck by Miss Reed's vehicle and then died as a result of exposure to the cold. Mr. O'Keefe was either dead when the house defendants left him on the Alberts' lawn, or he died shortly thereafter. After the physical altercation, Higgins left the house and drove to the Canton Police Department in the middle of the night. He later told investigators he had to do some administrative work, but then changed his story, subsequently stating that he drove to the station because he had to move cars in the parking lot due to the snowstorm. However, video from inside the station shows Higgins walking down the hallway and surreptitiously entering offices while wearing a hoodie to obscure his face. Surveillance video outside reveals Higgins transporting a large bag from one vehicle to another before driving away. After leaving the police station, Higgins and Brian Albert continued to coordinate their stories by calling each other multiple times in the early morning hours and ultimately spoke with each other on their cell phones at 2:22 a.m. Later, both Brian Albert and Higgins denied the existence of these phone calls, and then when confronted with their existence by a separate law enforcement agent, at a separate proceeding, they coordinated the same exact lie, falsely claiming the multiple calls and answers were just butt dials. However, 5 minutes after the Higgins-Albert call, Miss McCabe performed a Google search on her phone at 2:27 a.m. House longed to die in the cold, misspelling the first word. Specifically, Mr. O'Keefe's injuries were consistent with a physical altercation. He had bruises and lacerations on his face and a deep gash to the back of the head, suggesting that he was punched and fell backwards, hitting his head on a ridged surface. He also had dog bite wounds and scratches on his right arm and forearm. Equally evident, Mr. O'Keefe did not have a single injury consistent with being struck by a vehicle. He did not have any broken bones or even a bruise on his legs, feet, arms, shoulders, torso, back, ribs, or anywhere below his neck. that a medical examiner would otherwise expect to find on a person struck and killed by an impact from a 3-ton vehicle. And to erase any doubt, the Commonwealth's own medical examiner, the pathologist who conducted the autopsy for the Commonwealth, concluded that Mr. O'Keefe's body showed no signs of a vehicular strike. Now I'm going to pause for a second from reading the complaint to remind you that the proctor that they're referring to in this next passage is the former Massachusetts State Trooper Michael Proctor, who was ultimately fired from his job because of his actions on this case. The complaint reads as follows, quote, Proctor reported in text messages just hours into the investigation that the House defendants weren't going to get any shit for this because he's, referring to Brian Albert, a Boston cop, and that Proctor was determined to make the investigation cut and dry by bringing charges against the girl. Indeed, Proctor made his intentions clear in writing, Karen Reed had zero chance of skating. She's fucked. This pronouncement was a mere 16 hours after Mr. O'Keefe's body was discovered on the Alberts lawn, and Proctor had not even walked into the house. True to his promise, Proctor and his colleagues did not search the house for blood evidence resulting from the gash to the back of Mr. O'Keefe's head, or for fingerprints or for DNA evidence. Proctor did not search the house, despite the fact that Mr. O'Keefe was discovered without a winter coat, without the hat that several witnesses said he had been wearing that night, and without his left shoe. At Proctor's direction, the house was never processed by a criminalist or even photographed. No member of the MSP, including Proctor, set foot inside 34 Fairview for nearly a week. The police did not examine or take evidence from the Alberts German Shepherd that was in the house on January 29th, a dog that had a history of attacking other dogs and people. Neither Proctor nor any of the MSP troopers conducted physical examinations of the House defendants for evidence of involvement in the altercation, such as marks on their hands, knuckles, or face, or bruises on their bodies. They did not seize or search the House defendants' phones. They conducted only perfunctory, unrecorded conversations with Proctor's friends and acquaintances without any attempt to corroborate their stories. They permitted would-be witnesses to communicate with each other and coordinate their stories before any formal interviews. They allowed critical evidence to be manipulated in some instances and outright destroyed in others. In short, by focusing the investigation solely on Miss Reed as implicitly directed by the House defendants, through the misrepresentations they made to police, Proctor and his colleagues disregarded and failed to obtain pertinent interviews and other critical evidence from the House defendants that cannot now be recovered or recreated. Now, the suit also accuses investigators of ignoring evidence inside the home, failing to seize or search witnesses' phones, but also planting taillight pieces at the scene and mishandling other evidence. The complaint again specifically calls out Proctor. Quote, Proctor then went so far as to manufacture evidence to ensure that Miss Reed, not his friends and fellow law enforcement officers, was blamed for Mr. O'Keefe's death. This included planting evidence at the scene on Mr. O'Keefe's clothes and on Miss Reed's vehicle to support the false narrative that Miss Reed hit Mr. O'Keefe with her car, even though he knew Mr. O'Keefe's injuries were inconsistent with a motor vehicle strike and consistent with a physical altercation and dog attack. Now, I need to warn you that what I'm about to read next could be triggering. These are private messages from former state trooper Michael Proctor about Karen Reed. So again, I want to warn you, they're explicit and could be very upsetting. Quote, far from conducting an objective investigation with integrity, Proctor personally sexualized and dehumanized Miss Reed throughout the investigation. Specifically, Proctor's private communications to his high school buddies, sister, and MSP colleagues that he believed would never be discovered, exposed the corruption and bias at the core of MSP's entire investigation. Specifically, only hours into the investigation, in a text chain with 8 of his high school buddies, Proctor stated that Miss Reed is a, quote, whack job cunt, retarded, a nutbag, and a babe with no ass. Proctor further ridiculed and derided Miss Reed for her serious medical condition, stating that her balloon knot leaked poo. In other private messages to his MSP supervisors and colleagues, Proctor bragged that while conducting a search of Miss Reed's phone, he was looking for naked pictures of Miss Reed. Disappointed, he reported that there were no nudes so far. In an unfiltered utterance, Proctor revealed his true mindset. Hopefully she kills herself. Now, stick with me for this passage. It's a long one, but it talks about the allegations of Karen Reed being framed and it accuses investigators of planting evidence at the scene. Quote, by approximately 2:30 p.m. on January 29th, before he had even met or interviewed Miss Reed or seen her Lexus SUV, Proctor had already ordered seizure of the vehicle at her parents' home in Dighton. By 4:17 p.m., the vehicle was in MSP's physical possession. The vehicle was then towed to the CPD Sallyport, even though the MSP had at least 2 closer barracks and Massachusetts was in the middle of a historic nor'easter. Proctor knew he had more leeway to manipulate evidence regarding the SUV at CPD than at MSP's facility, and he knew he needed to have that evidence in close proximity to the crime scene at 34 Fairview Road. Before the vehicle arrived at the garage, Miss Reed's Lexus taillight had a minor crack but was intact. The crack occurred when Miss Reed backed into Mr. O'Keefe's car at 5 a.m. that morning as she was leaving to search for him. That incident was captured on video. Buchanan and Proctor followed the vehicle from Dighton and arrived at CPD at 5:35, just moments after the tow truck with the Lexus. At some point after the vehicle arrived at the Sallyport, the right rear taillight was almost entirely destroyed. Video taken from different angles in the Sallyport shows Buchanan, Proctor, Canton Police Chief Ken Berkowitz, and other individuals near the taillight, but notably, no video captures the taillight's appearance at the precise time it arrived at the Sallyport. The available surveillance video from the Sallyport, as well as a CPD access card swipe log obtained by a separate law enforcement agency, reveals seemingly unfettered access to the Sallyport by a myriad of individuals throughout the evening of January 29th, including just before and just after 5:30 p.m. One or more of them destroyed the taillight, secretly took pieces of it into their possession, and then planted some of them in various places at 34 Fairview and on Mr. O'Keefe's clothes. Knowing that there were video cameras both inside and outside the Sallyport, Proctor and Buchanan worked together to obscure their role in manipulating the right rear taillight and then, ultimately, to present false evidence at the first criminal trial. Specifically, Proctor directed Buchanan to secure video footage from surveillance cameras located both inside and outside the Sallyport garage, which he did. These videos were manipulated in 2 significant ways. First, a critical 42-minute portion was deleted from the footage from the Sallyport front wall camera. The portion from 5:08:02 p.m. to 5:50:50 p.m., which included the exact time Miss Reed's Lexus arrived in the garage. This footage would have shown that the taillight was intact. Second, footage from the Sallyport back wall camera was inverted, which made the right side of Miss Reed's vehicle appear to be the left side and vice versa. Another camera, main driveway side exterior, captured the back end of the Lexus as it arrived at CPD, but was too grainy to decipher the condition of the passenger taillight. The videos from inside and outside the Sallyport, and Proctor's request for Buchanan to obtain it was intentionally hidden from Karen Reed and her defense attorneys for more than 2 years to avoid scrutiny. The video was then sprung on them immediately before and during the first criminal trial. One driveway camera's footage was not revealed to the defense until just prior to the start of the second trial. In fact, Buchanan presented one part of the video during his direct testimony under questioning by the assistant district attorney. Buchanan narrated the video to the jury, correctly identified that Proctor was at the rear of the vehicle, but claimed that he never approached the right rear tailgate area of the vehicle. That testimony, however, was entirely false, as he well knew the video that Buchanan authenticated as fair and accurate was actually neither fair nor accurate because it had been inverted. Proctor was actually behind the right taillight for a significant period, but because it was inverted, it appeared in the video that he was behind the left taillight. They hoped this would allow Buchanan to lie about this issue at trial without detection. With this video and Buchanan's false testimony, the MSP, Proctor, and Buchanan attempted to mislead the jury in order to conceal the tampering with and planting of taillight material. Proctor also planted pieces of glass on the bumper of Miss Reed's SUV while it was in his possession at the CPD Sallyport garage, which he then claimed to have recovered later on February 1st. Proctor planted this evidence to make it look like these shards originated from a cocktail glass that Mr. O'Keefe was holding when he exited the Waterfall Bar. Evidently, Proctor did not plan on Karen Reed's defense attorneys insisting on forensic testing on those glass shards, which showed that they did not match the cocktail glass in Mr. O'Keefe's possession. In fact, the 5 glass pieces originated from multiple different sources. One shard of glass on the bumper did match another piece of glass that had been in Proctor's possession during the investigation. The only way for the glass to have ended up on the SUV bumper is that Proctor planted it there in an attempt to connect the vehicle to the death of Mr. O'Keefe. On page 42 of the 46-page civil complaint, the lawsuit reads, Proctor, Buchanan, Tully, the Alberts, the McCabe's, and Higgins shared a common design and acted in concert to frame Miss Reed for Mr. O'Keefe's death. Now, attorney Jim Tuxbury, representing the 5 House defendants, had this response to the lawsuit. Quote, "The allegations made by Karen Reed are entirely false, defamatory, and without merit. Our clients categorically deny each and every claim. This lawsuit is nothing more than a continuation of a baseless conspiracy narrative that has caused significant harm to the reputations and lives of innocent people." So up next on Criminal Mischief bonus content, my co-host Brandon Morgan and I will discuss this case in more detail. And another thing, if you haven't already, please head on over to EVO Creative on YouTube. That's EVIO Creative. And subscribe to our Criminal Mischief channel. And you can also find us on Instagram at CM with Carolyn and Brandon, or on Facebook at Criminal Mischief with Carolyn and Brandon. We'd love to hear from you. And as always, thanks for listening. From Pie in the Sky Media, Criminal Mischief is an EVO production, recorded live in the beautiful Pacific Northwest. We're produced by Brandon Morgan and myself, music by Soundstripe. For EVO Creative, I'm Carolyn Osorio, your writer and host.